One. Good morning, everyone. And no, this is not a special military edition episode of the Hardware Podcast. Just had a busy morning, came back from a meeting, but I'm here, Omar with Jackson, and we're here to talk about some more FCS football and some races, the award races like we did last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a strange, fun weekend in FCS college football. I don't know if you noticed that Southern Alabama State game had a total of 5 lost fumbles. We had a game that Delaware State and Howard. It was 3-2 was the score entering the fourth quarter. And the NDSU lost, which we haven't seen since 2017. Like what a great week in college football.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you mentioned Delaware State Howard, which we might talk about this at the end, the turbulent season with the MEAC, but I kind of wished I bet the under on that one because the spread going there is like I think in the 50s, and I looked at that, I'm like, man, I just lost out. But I went 2-1 on my bets this week, especially with Gardner-Webb, who that's my Cinderella for this year. I wrote an article about it, Gardner-Webb and Elon. And they came through. They 18-pointer dogs came through, and we'll mention them a little bit later on. But starting off, just a really wild week in terms of Walter Payton candidates. So Jackson, starting off, who were your top 4 guys, or just however many guys did you have on your radar?
Okay, well, we would be doing a disservice to the Walter Payton Award if we didn't talk about Lindsey Scott. Obviously, a quarterback for Nicholls in that 55-0 W versus Lamar. 16 for 21, 232 yards, 3 touchdowns. Not only that, 10 carries for 108 yards and another 3 rushing touchdowns. A phenomenal double threat. He's just really thrived in that system that Nicholls runs, and I don't anticipate it slowing down anytime soon. I've got another guy that threw for 4 touchdowns of Bronson Barron, a quarterback for Weber State, 49-21 W versus Idaho State. He was 17 for 27, 312 yards and 4 touchdowns. Cole Kelly is a guy I wanted to bring up, the quarterback from Southeastern Louisiana. No, they did lose 43-38 against Sam Houston State, but man, what a performance he had. 36 for 53, not the greatest throwing percentage or completion percentage, but 462 yards and 4 touchdowns, which was just, as far as yards, like that is way more than we saw from anyone else that week. And then as much as I love talking our quarterbacks on here, I really want to give some love to a receiver on here, Jackson Jake from South Dakota State. I think we had a lot of questions about that Jackrabbit receiving core after Cade Johnson, the NFL bound receiver, left there. But Jank went for 7 receptions, 161 yards, and another 2 tutties in that loss. Even though it was a loss, he had a great performance versus North Dakota.
Yeah, I totally agree. So especially with Lindsey Scott, I'm surprised you picked Lindsey Scott because you being all decked out in Gator gear, the words "Run Lindsey Run," especially Lindsey Scott, are almost like a curse word for you guys. So I had to bring it up.
Yeah, well, this is Nicholls. I'm unofficial, or I'm officially adopting Nicholls for this spring. So I'm
You don't have to
loving
say
how
his
they
name
play.
though. Yeah, you don't have to say.
We're on a first name base, or we're on a last name base. Just Scott.
Scott. Yeah.
Scott Jr. Just to specify.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, agree with. There's like a lot of great quarterback performances. You could even look to Eric Schmid on the other side before I get into my rankings for Sam Houston State, who did not make my my top 4. So my top guy actually, because being new to the Walter Payton Award, I'm sort of thinking that wins takes an account, and just success and being like, the best conferences does too. So my first guy, last week we mentioned Tommy Schuster. I think First off, Lindsey Scott, of course. I don't want to beat a dead horse. He's been phenomenal against kind of subpar competition. So once Nicholls actually gets into like some actual dogfights in the Southland against Sam Houston State.
You're beating subpar competition by like an average of like a 67-point margin of victory. Like, it's insane.
That's true. Yeah. But
like they're subpar, but they're like beating them to death. Like it's insane.
I mean, I guess that just adds luster to the Southland. I think the Southland has responded well to losing, I think 4 schools to the WAC in the future. So they've responded well in the first, or at least Lamar, or sorry, not Lamar, but Nicholls has responded well representing the Southland. But we'll see in the coming weeks, and we'll talk about that later on about Nicholls being a title contender. But Lindsey Scott, of course, front runner for the Walter Payton. A close second, Tommy Schuster, who has 4 touchdowns as North Dakota has beaten some really quality competition. They beat Southern Illinois week 1 on a Friday night. They beat South Dakota State. Actually, was that the Friday night game? That was Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. Yeah. But then they beat South Dakota State, a team who's like a perennial contender out of the Missouri Valley Conference. The rankings are a bit wonky here as they're number 4 behind a UNI team that's 1-1 with their 1 loss to South Dakota State. I mean, it's a bit weird. There's even controversies in the FCS stats poll, I think. I mean, I don't want to get started with that. So Schuster's my number 2. My number 3 guy actually is sort of a dark horse. I'm going to go with a couple of dark horses here. My number 3 guy is Reese Udinsky, a guy who had over 280 yards in VMI's upset win over Furman. And if you guys saw the end of this game, folks, it was absolutely wild as a man in motion. So Furman has the ball in the VMI 27. Wide receiver goes in motion. Center snaps the ball, hits the receiver in motion. VMI recovers, and VMI wins against a very crucial game in the SoCon against a Furman team that was ranked. So I'm going to go Reese Udinsky, who had over 280 yards against the Paladins. Pulling that up to be exact right here. Or 248, excuse me. Got my numbers mixed up. So I think if Udinsky has some big games and VMI actually breaks a hump and not only gets their first winning season since 1981, but makes the playoffs as well, I think Udinsky could sneak up there. And then I'm going to go with Eric Schmid for my 3rd guy. I know you picked Cole Kelly, but just him winning first off, and also just being a dual threat as well, having the 428 passing and the 88 for Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State, Lamar, or why do I keep saying Lamar? It's the colors. The colors mix me up. Sam Houston State and Nicholls will be probably one of the biggest games of the FCS season, I think. Like Schmid versus Scott, unbelievable quarterback battle. So right there, those are my top 4. Kind of interchangeable now because it's kind of hard because we have guys that played 1 game, guys that played 2 games, but a lot different now this week. Guys like Cameron Dunstan fell off against Dixie State as Tarleton. I don't know what happened at home, lost to Dixie State by 2 scores.
Yeah, and what you said about dark horses, I want to clarify. Jackson Jank is kind of my dark horse. I don't really think a receiver this year is going to win it, much less Jackson Jank. But he just had such an outstanding performance, even despite the loss. I mean, anytime you go over really 120 yards as a receiver and more than 1 touchdown, I just want to bring that up. But yeah, those are some quality candidates, and I think we're pretty much very much in line about Lindsey Scott. Like I think we're both very agreeant that he's going to continue to have a phenomenal season, and we're going to continue to talk about him a lot for sure.
Yeah, and something that I'm interested to see happens is I know you remember Geno Smith's wonderful 2012 September. While we have like the September Heisman sort of thing. I know SB Nation came up with like the September Heisman. They had a blog post about that. I wonder if Lindsey Scott is an early season flame just because of the weak competition. And I wonder if things will get rougher in the Southland for him. But that's definitely a storyline to see, especially with North Dakota State losing, South Dakota State losing once as well, or losing to North Dakota last weekend. And really just your normal contenders aren't really taking center stage. Of course, this week, the CAA, the Colonial Athletic Association, will kick off, even though James Madison has played a couple non-conference games. Conference play will kick off for the CAA, which is probably probably the second best conference in FCS. But again, another trend to see. But moving on to Buck Buchanan Award for the best defensive player, Jackson, who's on your radar for the Buck Buchanan?
Yeah, absolutely. A guy I really wanted to bring up is Charles Peeler. He's a defensive back for Delaware State. This week he had a forced fumble, 3 tackles, 2 pass breakups. I really wanted to bring him up, though, because he's a former wide receiver. It was actually mid-season after week 3 last year that he actually made the switch. And if you go on ESPN on Delaware State's website, he's still listed as a wide receiver. But he had a critical forced fumble. Yeah, 3 tackles is what it is, and then the 2 pass breakups, and he's really thrived as a defensive back. And I can expect to continue to see that because it's so interesting to me whenever you make a switch to the other side of the ball at any time, because then more so than you would have if you had played defensive back your whole life what the receiver is thinking. You can kind of get that feeling and kind of not mind read, but you those little tips and tricks and whatnot that you can. And I think Peeler will continue to have a great season. Another guy from Delaware State, ironically enough, that I had to bring up was Esias Guthrie. Just a walk-off pick 6 that sealed that win. He also had 3 tackles. But if you were watching that game, it was kind of Howard's last chance to go down and score. And then it was exactly, you remember that Tracy Porter pick 6 in that Super Bowl? It was exactly like that. Just read that little dig route and then just took it all the way back. Another guy, I'll go ahead and bring up another guy with an interception, Omar Rogers, defensive back for Elon Phoenix. They did have a 42-20 loss, but he had an interception for 56 yards, 3 solo and 6 assists. And then finally, Roderick Campbell. He's a corner for Southern Illinois in that huge win versus North Dakota State. 1 interception, 2 tackles. That interception, though, came up when they were up 24-7. There was about 13 and a half minutes left in the fourth. NDSU had the ball. Really felt like NDSU's last chance to go down and score and maybe have a shot at winning it. And it was one of 2 turnovers in that game for Southern Illinois, but it was definitely the most timely and really set them up for victory after that.
Yeah, no, I think those are all strong choices. I'm gonna have to push back a little bit there on a couple of your Delaware State guys. I mean, those were like really amazing performances this week, but really with the MEAC, the way it is, how they're all, it's pretty much a mess right now. You only have Delaware State, Howard, South Carolina State got canceled this weekend because of travel restrictions at DC, traveling to South Carolina. And really for Delaware State, Howard, and South Carolina State, they're just not playing that many games. And the games they're playing aren't really that influential, which I am not dissing HBCU football. I am an absolute proponent of HBCU football. I mean, I got this book hanging right above me right here, my Black College Football Coffee book, which is actually cited in one of my thesis sources looking at my thesis, and it was kind of funny. But yeah, but totally great performances there, especially anyone that saw that really sloshy Delaware State Howard game. Defense definitely prevailed there. But my guys, I'm going to start off with one guy from Gardner-Webb who I think is a front runner, especially after his big game against the Elon Phoenix, the ranked Elon Phoenix, and Gardner-Webb's the Running Bulldogs' first ranked win since 2016. Ty French had 12 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 1.5 sacks. So total disruption in the backfield for the Running Bulldogs. And as we discussed in the last episode, the Buck Buchanan Award has been a front 7 award for the most part. And with performances like that, and I think there's chances too for French, especially if you look at Kennesaw State, who is pretty much the front runner along with Monmouth in the Big South for the title. Kennesaw State runs triple option. So Ty French is going to have a busy day against the Owls of Kennesaw State, who showed some vulnerability this past weekend against Shorter College, a 1-win Division II school. That game was 7-3 in the late stages of the second and 14-3 heading into, or I think 21-3 heading into the fourth quarter. But Shorter showed their might, and really Kennesaw State showed some vulnerability. Keep in mind too that the Running Bulldogs have never been in the FCS playoffs. My next guy I like is sorry, I'm trying to find his name. I had his name right here. It's Spence Cavelier, who has 20 tackles in 2 games for Northern Iowa. And if you want another Northern Iowa guy, Christian Boyd has 2.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks for Northern Iowa. So again, with the front 7, you can go interchangeable there with either one of those 2 guys. And again, they're playing in the marquee conference of FCS football, the Missouri Valley, so they'll have plenty of, spotlight chances, and they've been pretty quality too. That defense, at least, despite being 1-1. And my last two guys, kind of interchangeable as well. Trey Walker out of Idaho and his teammate Christian Ellis, who each had 15 tackles in that wild win against Eastern Washington, number 12th ranked Eastern Washington, with which was known for field goal gate. But those guys were absolute just ball hawks around the field, and Walker had a sack and Ellis had 2 tackles for loss. But if those guys can put up tackle numbers too against offenses like that against offenses like Eastern Washington, they'll probably face Weber State sometime soon. I say why not put these guys in the running?
Yeah, those are all great picks. And you mentioned it being a front 7 award. I should point out that I know I had all DBs. Rashawn Mathis was the last player, or the last defensive back to win the award, and actually the only one in 2002. And he ended up being a second-round draft pick out of Bethune-Cookman. So he had a phenomenal year. When he played, he went to the Jaguars, if I remember right, doing that research. But this has been a front 7. I'll try and get more front 7 guys. I just love my corners and my safeties that make game changing plays. Yeah, kind of that's what I get for listening to Dion so much.
Yeah, no. I mean, I like D-backs too. I played corner in high school, so I have no hard feelings towards D-backs. So I try to focus with the trends of the award. With looking at the front 7, there were some great front 7 performances. So if you guys are looking for underdogs, though, in FCS this spring, Gardner-Webb and the VMI Keydets, as much as it hurts me to hype up VMI going here at West Point, I mean, it's been 39 seasons since they've had a winning year. Like, you got to root for them.
I thought you were special teams at high school.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when I did play defense.
No, I'm just messing with you. Yeah. Moving on to those are great awards, and we'll continue to keep talking about those and the races for those awards as we keep going. I think there were a couple of little conversation bits we wanted to go over. Obviously with NDSU, what do you think about that loss, and not only what it means for NDSU, what it means for Southern Illinois?
So I think if we're looking at it, so the FCS playoffs this year has 16 teams, down from 24 in a regular year, and the pandemic. I don't blame them for reducing schedule. They're going to be really hard pressed putting in teams. I think the MVC might dominate the field, if I'm being honest, because you got UNI at number 3 in the FCS stats poll. You got North Dakota at 4 at 2-0. North Dakota UNI is going to be a huge game, as is the battle for the nickel for North Dakota and North Dakota State. You have South Dakota State at 8. North Dakota State is 6 at 2-1. Keep in mind they did beat Central Arkansas in the fall too. So, I mean, it leaves a vacuum, of course, nationally, but on a lower level at the MVC. I don't think North Dakota State's totally fallen off because they were pretty dominant in their win against Youngstown State, but Youngstown State has severe offensive problems. I just think, given the pandemic, it might just be an open year for everyone. I mean, I know that might be a cop-out answer, but that just shows in the pandemic, even North Dakota State's not susceptible to a fall.
I don't want to take anything away from Southern Illinois because they played a phenomenal game and they played their tails off, and it showed, and it was a convincing victory. But just watching it, this isn't a team. Southern Illinois isn't a team that's like an up and coming team. Like, they were 7-5 last year. They're not exactly like some up and coming powerhouse that we're seeing rise to the top. I think they were just the better team on this day. I think if they played 10 times, I think NDSU may win like 8 or 9 times. I think they were just the better team on this day. They had more energy. Their defensive line brought pressure. NDSU, whenever they kind of got a little momentum, like that pick 6, like it got called back by an offsides penalty. They tried, whenever they got a big play, they tried that hurry up offense to get to the line of scrimmage and go. And they had that, it was like a 65-yard reception right before the half. And then the fourth, that gutsy 4th down QB draw play that they ran on 4th and goal. But they just played with more energy, and I don't know necessarily more talent, but they just wanted to win that game. And I think their head coach afterwards said, like, this may be the biggest game that we've ever played in the stadium. Like, this is a really big game, and this is going to be remembered for a long time. And it wasn't really like, okay, on to the next one. We knew this was going to happen. Let's go and, win the next one. It was kind of like, okay, we just had an awesome game, and they did, and they deserved to celebrate. But it was just kind of like, I think they just really wanted to win this game, and this game in particular. And I don't know that Southern Illinois is going to be a contender for the rest of the season. I know NDSU is, because they're going into this is their first loss since like November of 2017. Like they're ready. Like, okay, like we got to double down. We're susceptible to this too, And I think we'll see NDSU have a great rest of their season.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying let me see where to start. I want to start off with North Dakota State's quarterback play. I mean, Zeb Nolan hasn't been great, and he sort of showed some vulnerabilities against Youngstown State.
It's definitely a step down from Trey Lance, but Trey Lance is a top half first round pick. Like,
oh, of course,
there's gonna be a drop off,
Yeah, I mean, Nolan's no slouch either. I mean, he went to Iowa State, started a few games there out in the Big 12. But I do agree that North Dakota State should be back, but it's going to be tougher because maybe this is North Dakota's window. I mean, you beat Southern Illinois week 1 at home, then you beat South Dakota State. I mean, this might be North Dakota's window. There's so many Dakotas in the doggone Missouri Valley Conference. Yeah, it's confusing. But if you look down the polls too, and just take a look at, I mean, the rest of the country, I mean, a lot of the regular powers are just, they had losses. Or you had Furman lose to VMI, as we mentioned. Wofford. I mean, Wofford's given some FBS teams a hard run over the few years, and they with their nice run game, they've been a traditional power in the SoCon. They lost last week to Chattanooga. Eastern Washington lost to Idaho. I mean, blame the field goal all you want. They did give up a touchdown, so the field goal was kind of a moot point, as bad as it was. This just might be some teams' windows. I mean, maybe a Nicholls comes up and contends out in FCS. Maybe Weber State. Maybe it's Weber State. You're out in the Big Sky. I just don't think we know enough with like the staggered schedules, and that's something that we should watch out for, really. Yeah, I mean, I want to ask too. So we've been tooting Lindsey Scott's horn this whole time. Do you think Nicholls is a national title contender, or do you think they're all, this is just a show at this point?
I think we had the text conversation between us yesterday I said, this kind of feels like 2019 LSU. Like, this feels special. And then you hit me with, no, I feel like it might be like 2018 Boise State, where they have like comparable victories by like 50 points and 60 points 2 weeks in a row and then fall off a cliff. But yeah, time will tell. But I want to give a little context for Nicholls, because if you're like me, you didn't really know anything about Nicholls football until this. And there's a good reason for that. Even if you do follow the FCS, it's because they haven't had that much history. They've competed in the playoffs, in the FCS playoffs a few times in their history. And then I want to fast forward it to 2014 in their history. I think it was like 3 or 4 times they'd been to the playoffs total. Fast forward to 2014, they hire Tim Rebower. Tim Rebower had been an assistant for Nicholls from 95 to 2001, and then moved on to Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana Lafayette, and then in 2014 again hired again by Nicholls as their head coach. They went from 3-8 to 5-6 to 8-4, and then after that to back-to-back Southland Conference championship games. And then they did lose in the FCS playoffs in the second rounds of that, but kind of, I mean, Tim Rebower has just turned this program around, and it kind of reminds me of Matt Rule, what he did with Temple, what he did at Baylor, where it's like, okay, we have a terrible season, and then we have a mediocre season. At Baylor, I think you went 1-11, 6-6, and then 12-1. And then competed in that Sugar Bowl against Georgia. And we'll see what he does at the Panthers now. But it just kind of reminds me of this like stark turnaround. And then now they might be winning 3 times. I don't know if it's ever been done before. If it has been, it's been a long time. 3 consecutive Southland Conference championships. And he's had a lot of experience. He was a coach in high school. He actually coached Ed Reed in high school. I watched an interview with him earlier today, and he talked about stressing the importance of every game in such a short season. And talked about we're looking at this as 1 week seasons every week because we got to give it all because one game could mess us up. So yeah, I think Nicholls has just kind of got that formula, and it's like kind of back-to-back New Year's Six Bowls, and then, okay, let's see what they do next. What's that next step? And no, there is a 14 playoff in the FBS, and there's a bigger one in the FCS, but I think they can advance farther than that and maybe even get to a semifinal. If not, man, I think they could win it all just the way that they're playing. Now with this, are they peaking too early? Like that's my main worry, I guess, is if they're peaking too early and they need to kind of not slow down, but like, are they going to be able to keep this up?
Yeah, and again, it seems like they won't really be tested this upcoming weekend as they play Northwestern State.
And they will be in the playoffs. That's another thing. Like they won't be tested now, but they will be come April.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see about that because it could make for some tight windows. There's 11 auto bids, so chances are, with the way that the MVC is going, MVFC, every other conference needs you need to win your conference to get in. Because I like in past years, there's 13 at-large bids and 11 auto bids. This year, not so much. There's a bunch of uncertainty. But this weekend, we'll again see. It's another weak opponent this weekend as they play Northwestern State, who went 3-9 in 2019. Can't even say last year in 2019.
I just want to say, if you bet on FCS football, over under 58 is like the easiest money you can have on Nicholls versus Northwestern State. That is like an insane line. Like take that all day for sure.
Hot take.
Yeah, that's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN Plus this Saturday if you're interested in watching that as well.
Yeah, definitely get ESPN Plus, a great deal, $5. I got the Disney Plus bundle with Hulu for the family. Great value for this FCS season.
You need ESPN Plus if you plan on watching the FCS. Like that's where it's going to be. Anyone besides Jackson State is pretty much going to be on ESPN Plus. And I think even they have a couple appearances on there too.
Yeah. Even then with ESPN 3, you need like a cable subscription. So
That's true. I forgot about that. That's true.
But Pluto TV in the Big Sky, amazing deal, totally free. If you don't want to pay $5 a month, which I understand, paywalls are they suck. But yeah, like we'll see again with Nicholls State. Again, it's not really their first test again as they face another weak opponent, but maybe they'll run it up again. But I think that's a good segue into our games to watch for this weekend, Jackson. So what's on your radar this pretty much just a full spread out weekend? We got games tonight all the way up to Sunday.
My first one is actually the game tonight. It's South Dakota and North Dakota. We've said the word Dakota more than I think we ever have in our lives. But South Dakota, North Dakota, 1-0 versus 2-0. That's going to be 6 p.m. tonight Eastern time on ESPN Plus. And then my other one that I thought was interesting, Jackson State, Dion's second game as a head coach versus Grambling on the road in their season debut. That's going to be on ESPN3. Grambling's a 10.5-point favorite in this. So I'm interested to see if Dion's got something cooked up, if Grambling is going to, have a great debut. And then I already mentioned Nicholls at Northwestern State. I think Nicholls is going to win. It's a matter of how convincingly, I think. Are they going to have like a 60-point margin of victory, or are they going to fall off and only win by 30 points? Not that would be bad. It just shows a sign of decline. And of course, you need to watch out for Lindsey Scott if you plan on tuning into that game. That game is going to be on ESPN Plus, 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday again.
So, all great games too, really high profile. I'm gonna go a little bit with underdogs. Like I'm really excited for tonight, some Thursday night football. I'm gonna play back the Pentatonics theme from 2016. I'm a huge Pentatonics guy, and that was just the best years of my life when they had the intro to Thursday Night Football. Perfect start to the weekend. But yeah, definitely South Dakota, North Dakota, and I believe both teams are ranked. Well, yeah, South Dakota's ranked 20th, and North Dakota's ranked 4th. So a little ranked versus ranked matchup on a Thursday night on ESPN Plus. For our listeners, of course, in South Dakota, if we have any listeners in South and North Dakota, that's on the Mid-Continent Sports Network. So that's pretty cool. Some RSN action. And then heading to Saturday, you have the start of the CAA, which is pretty exciting. You can pick any game there. I mean, Delaware is a contender always. James Madison, Elon. But the ones I'm going to point to in the early window,
JMU has played a couple games so far, right?
yeah, they played non-conference games. Yeah, they blew out Morehead State, Phil Simms' alma mater, non-scholarship team. They blew them out 52-0 in week 1, and the week after they had a little bit of trouble against Robert Morris, who is in the Big South, but hasn't really had a great program out there in Western Pennsylvania. But they kind of showed some vulnerabilities there. But so my top games though with the brief aside. Early window, Presbyterian, Gardner-Webb. Presbyterian starting off anew in the Pioneer Football League, sort of a de-emphasis. They're no longer going to offer football scholarships, and they play that Gardner-Webb team that's getting votes despite beating a ranked team. So maybe, I mean, Gardner-Webb was left out of the stats poll this weekend, so maybe Gardner-Webb shows the voters something and really blows out Presbyterian. But this was a close game last year, and don't count out the Blue Hose out there in South Carolina. And then next up after that, another game I'm looking at. Sorry, scrolling through. There's so many options. It's great. It's really something. After that, well, actually, again, in the early window, let's go Western Carolina VMI as well. And again, I'm really big on my Cinderellas. Can VMI continue their we'll call it a dream season, I guess, or well, will it be a dream season against Western Carolina, a team that has been blown out in their first couple of games in the SoCon and also got blown up by Liberty in the fall. So we'll see if VMI can get to 2-0 and break into the stats poll to make themselves more known for an at-large bid. And then Sunday, my last game, there's a few good options at night. You got Texas Southern, Prairie View A&M, a good battle. Usually the Labor Day Classic, HBCU Classic out in the fall, but of course it's not on Labor Day. And on Sunday night, you have New Mexico State, Dixie State. Dixie State won their first game as an FCS school. This past Saturday against Tarleton State squad that had looked great in the first 2 weeks. I'm not sure what happened, but they play New Mexico State team that I wouldn't say they have a lot to prove, but this could be something that really, hurts recruiting if they lose to Dixie State, especially in the fashion that they did last week to Tarleton State, or not last week, but 2 weeks ago. So those are my ones to watch. Conferences that are beginning play are the NEC and the CAA, as I mentioned before. So, something to look forward to on that front.
Another guy that I want to bring up that hasn't played yet, Villanova and Stony Brook are going to be playing this week, 11 a.m. or Central Time. But a guy I wanted to bring up, we might be talking next week about the Walter Payton Award. Daniel Smith, the quarterback for Villanova, a transfer from Campbell University where he set career records for total offense, rushing touchdowns, passing yards, passing touchdowns. I mean, he was just breaking records left and right. And he's transferring to Villanova this year. Had a battle with the quarterback position, seems to have won it. I'm excited to see what he can do on the road against Stony Brook.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And Nova is ranked number 5 in the stats poll right now. So a lot of high hopes out there in Philadelphia. So we'll just have to see. That one, it will be on Flow Football, which is I think $19.95 a month subscription. And they usually have CAA football along with UMass and New Mexico State's games for out of market viewers. I can't say that I've gone on to Flow Football because I can't see myself paying $20 on top of my YouTube TV subscription just for UMass, New Mexico State, and the CAA. But hey, maybe that's your flavor usually. So
you can get the free audio recap next week on the Hardware Podcast. We'll talk about the best performances, and we'll even mention the final score probably. So, and that's free.
Yeah, that's free too. Maybe the Statcast too. Maybe I might read off the Statcast and do a because in the old days of radio. So I'm not sure if you know, but Ronald Reagan got his start by getting the pitch by pitch for Cubs games by telegram. So he wasn't actually at the games. So he was at like a radio station somewhere in the Midwest. I want to say Iowa, but he'd get the telegraph pitch by pitch. And this one time, the he didn't get the pitch, like the telegram wasn't working. So the telegraph wasn't working. And so he kept saying that they fouled off the pitch several times. And it had to have been the longest at bat ever. So it might just be that where I read off the stats and, do a radio broadcast or something.
That's not as impressive when you consider that Elvis was a huge college football fan and was like the first person ever to have like 4 TVs and be watching 4 games at once. And I think it's in Memphis, because when College Game Day was in Memphis, Chris Fowler did a bit on that, and it showed his room where he had like 4 TVs all right next to each other, and he would be watching college football on Saturdays with like 4 TVs like we do now, just on I guess one on the TV, one on another, and on our iPad and phone. But yeah, he had it made back in the day.
I am amazed by that he was able to do that, because I don't want to go into a tangent about the history of college football on TV, but it was a largely regionalized contract, like we see in the NFL.
When you're Elvis, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy that he was able. I mean, the technology too. Like, how is he able to get regional feeds? Because I mean, there is a sports forum that I'm on, and it has lists. I'm not sure how they compile it, but it has a list of pretty much every single regional game, regional game that ABC's broadcast since 1966. And
you opened my eyes to like Saturday Night Football like 15 years ago was like regionalized. Like, I did not know this until recently, right? Yeah. Wasn't it like it would be like divided up in 2, sometimes even 3 different parts of the country, and be like, I guess you just had to. And now we've got like the SEC network and the whatever it is. I think every conference has a network except for the Big 12, it seems like now, but we'll probably eventually get there. So
yeah, so just a bonus treat while we're on the topic about regional schedules, because a lot of this involved FCS schools. So right now I'm pulling up a regional slate on this forum that I'm on, and these guys have done a lot of research. 506 forums. I'll put the link in the description. So let's look at October 3rd of 1981. Your regional slate for 12 p.m. You had Navy at Yale with the great Al Michaels calling it, a game that I have seen. I have on DVD. I'm not going to disclose how I've got it. There are video traders, but
who doesn't have it on DVD?
I mean, the video trading ring is great. I mean, the sports video trading community is amazing. It's an amazing historical community. But you had Navy Yale with the great Al Michaels on the call, Purdue, Wisconsin, Clemson, Kentucky, Baylor, Houston, Arkansas, Kansas, Southeast Missouri State versus Southwest Missouri State, which I believe is now Missouri State. And then for the late regional slate, you had Pittsburgh, South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State, San Jose State, Fresno State, and UNLV, Wyoming. So really just like all over the place. And for Elvis to be able to get like, it's blowing my mind. It's really blowing my mind right now.
That was back. I'd be curious about that Mississippi State Missouri game, because that was back when it was Big 12 and SEC. So
yeah, you know who called that game?
Who?
Vern Lundquist. That's who's listed here.
Really? Oh, Vern. Man, I miss him on
I miss CBS. Vern. I do miss Vern.
He was great.
Yeah, but
we should call this part of the podcast the tangent from now.
The tangent, yeah.
Pick some random topic we during the podcast and start talking about it. But yeah, this was not planned. If you've listened this far, this was not planned. So yeah, but man, what a great weekend in college football, and we'll continue to go out. And I mean, man, this is taking us right up to the NFL draft, really. I think maybe even a little bit beyond. I think it ends the weekend before. But yeah, I mean, this is great. And South Dakota and North Dakota tonight, I'll be taking an exam, but probably catch the highlights of that. We'll see if Nicholls continues to dominate. Jackson State, of course, is always interesting with Dion, VMI, and the success that they've had. Yeah, it's going to be a fun week. And and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and so until next time, we'll hope to see you next week after a great FCS weekend. But until next time, peace, love, and soul, everyone.